Hey, 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 welcome to day 3. You are halfway through your challenge, which is awesome. And I hope you're starting to feel some of those benefits of changing the way that you're eating. So today I want to talk about whole foods versus processed foods. You really want your diet to be 70 to 80% whole foods in terms of what you're consuming. And when I say diet, I don't mean in the terms of like, oh, I'm losing weight, so I'm only going to be doing this for the next 90 days. I mean, just overall what you're eating on a day-to-day. And what is a whole food, or what classifies as that, are foods that are in their most natural state. So, you know, picking an apple off of a tree, having an orange off of a tree. These foods have not been processed and they're in their natural state, aka what we call a whole food. Why is it so important to have so much of your diet come from whole foods? It's because they are what we call nutrient dense. Foods that are nutrient dense are high in nutrients. That's probably the obvious thing based on the name. They are also low in calories. So if you're ever let's say you are calorie counting, even though I'm really focusing you guys on portions and stuff, but if you're ever calorie counting, 2 cups of lettuce are going to be maybe 20 calories, or you could have a whole cup of watermelon and you're going to get 50 calories out of that, but there's so much nutrients in it. So low in calorie, high in nutrients, and that's really what you want because your body is going to be nourished, and that's really important. So you want to think about in your day-to-day, how many whole foods do I really have every day that I'm eating? And if that number is low, then try to increase it little by little. You know, it's very difficult to make a drastic change, but try to increase it little by little. For me personally, when I first started my kind of journey and eating healthier and making this a permanent life change, my numbers were pretty low, to be totally honest. I maybe had a piece of fruit for breakfast and I got some vegetables at dinner, but there wasn't any in between where I got like a lot of whole foods because I grew up eating out of the box, eating processed foods. So let's talk about that. What is the deal with processed foods? Processed foods are whole foods that have been modified in some way. They have been broken down. They're often, unfortunately, stripped of their nutrients because that is a way for the people who make processed foods to give the foods a longer shelf life. So they will strip them of the nutrients and add a bunch of other chemicals to them, which gives them a longer shelf life. Or they might also add chemicals to give them the foods a certain color or a certain flavor so that they can be desirable and consumable. So the problem with processed foods is not only because they've been stripped of their nutrients that they're an issue, they're also an issue because the body has to work twice as hard to break these chemicals down, especially some of the chemicals that have just been added to the foods that are not naturally found in the plants or the vegetables or the animals where we get these foods from. So, and just to give you an example, a really good example is sugar gets added to a lot of different foods. And unfortunately, refined sugar, processed sugar, blocks the body's ability to release certain hormones. So just to give you some context around this, if you consume a lot of processed sugar, that keeps the hormone that lets the brain know that you're full from being released, and it never reaches the brain. So that can cause you to feel like, well, geez, I'm still hungry. And so then you're eating and you're eating, even though your body may actually be full. So that's just one example. There are lots of other examples of how these chemicals really affect the body in a negative way and alter the rest of the body's ability to process. So not just your ability to metabolize these foods, but also the rest of your bodily functions. So we want to try to stay away from them. Is it possible to never eat another processed food again? I'm sure it is. I'm sure there are people on the planet who do it. I am not one of those people, so I'm not asking you to completely give up processed food. I keep, for example, some pastas in my cabinet, or if I'm going to make, if I'm making spaghetti or something, I do buy canned spaghetti sauce. I don't always make that from scratch. What you want to do is really read your labels. So when you're purchasing processed foods, I try to look for labels that I can read and understand the ingredients. So that's a great question to ask yourself when you read the ingredients. Can I pronounce these things? Do I know what these things are? 9 times out of 10, if the ingredient has a name that's like 40 letters, it is probably something that is man-made and probably not something I want to put in my body. So do I recognize the ingredients? how long is the ingredient list? If it's friggin', I don't know, 50 things on the ingredient list, I'm probably not going to eat it because I have no idea what half of that stuff is. So I don't want to touch it. I try to find foods where the labels have maybe 5 to 7 things in the ingredient list. And I go, okay, I can work with this. So that's a good rule of thumb for you outside of looking at what can I pronounce, what's in it. Another thing to think about when you're looking at the labels, the very first element that's listed on the ingredients is usually the element that has the most, that has been entered the most, if that makes sense. So like if sugar is the first thing on the list, it means there's probably tons of sugar in this thing, in this processed food that you're purchasing, and you probably should just leave it on the shelf and don't buy it or don't eat it. So I would go so far as to say if you find it in your house, just throw it out. For example, I found an apple juice that I had in my house, and it has 22 grams of sugar just in one 8-ounce cup. And I was like, oh my gosh, how did I miss that? So I threw it out. And people might think that's extreme, but that's how I handle my life. So you're probably not going to give up processed foods completely, but do pay attention to what you're buying that's processed. Same goes for frozen veggies and frozen fruits. Just read the labels and make sure there's not a bunch of extra sugar, especially things like dye. Like you might see dye number 7, yellow number 5. A lot of studies are showing now that those dyes are linked to cancers. So you just want to be careful about them and avoid them altogether wherever possible. So look at your labels. If you're going to have processed foods, try to incorporate more whole foods than processed foods that you're having in your life, your day-to-day, and think about how you can make healthier choices each time that you're preparing a meal. So that's all I have for you. I will see you guys tomorrow.